Okay, so Unit 7.1, Part 4. Liberal reform in England, 1820 to 1830. Up to this point, the videos that you guys have watched, we talked about conservatism. We talked about nationalism. We talked about liberalism. We talked about a lot of the isms. We only have two left. Anybody want to take a stab at what the two left? Romanticism today and the last one? What? Marxism is part of it. What's the bigger? Socialism. Okay? Very good. So two isms left, a lot of isms down. We talked about these isms and what problems they're creating at the Congress of Vienna. We talked about the individuals that represented each of these different isms, like Metternich, of course, our big nosy. He is going to be our conservative, or epitome of conservative. We have the liberals, who are pushing for nationalism and liberal reforms like equality, and it's not fair that guy gets to vote if I don't get to vote, etc. And then we also talked about nationalism and liberalism individually. And so now we're moving into England. And you can put out to the side here, England's going to kind of be our exception. What happens on the continent is not going to happen the exact same way for them. They're our exception here to the rule. Anybody want to take a guess at why we might be leaving England out of these revolutions right now, of 1815 to 1850? Industrial Revolution. Yeah, they're like, we're industrialized. We have kind of moved ourselves ahead of the other nations. That's one part of the reason. Can anybody remember, and it specifically goes back to an individual we talked about from England, who didn't have very nice things to say about the French Revolution? Edmund Burke. He's going to say that you shouldn't revolutionize, you should what? Evolutionize. Don't revolutionize, evolutionize. Take some small steps. England is going to take small steps instead of big ones. Instead of like going and cutting people's heads off and building barricades like the rest of Europe we're going to do, they're going to take small steps. They're going to make little reforms, enough to keep the people happy. Okay, so we have England in the Reformation. What's going on? We talked about the group called the Tories. Okay, so we have our group of Tories, which is the Conservative Party. I said that they're the ancestor of the Conservative Party in England right now. They're conservative, but most of their members are young. As young people, do you prefer things to stay exactly the same or to change? To change it up, right? You want things to stay interesting. And so while they're conservative, you might want to circle Tories here and write that while they're the Conservative Party and they have gained power and influence, they are young. And they still want some change. They think that it can both be done. And so what happens to them is they are able to ally with the Whigs. So we have two parties in England right now. We have the Tories, who are conservative, and we have the Whigs, who are liberal, just like we have Republicans and Democrats in the United States. Okay? So we have the Whigs who are liberal. And since the Tories are young and they're willing to make some changes, the Whigs are going to ally with them, and this is going to increase their strength. And so they are able to come together here and compromise. So England, unlike Prussia, Russia, Austria, Greece, Italy, all the other places we talked about in part 1 through 3, are going to be able to compromise rather than just start killing people and throwing up some barricades in the streets. Okay? Some of the reforms that they're going to be able to pass right here, you can see at the top here, they are going to abandon that Congress system of 1822 that we had seen put in place. Does anybody remember why England decided to leave the Congress system or the Quadruple Alliance? What was the specific thing that ticked them off?
The Spanish Rebellion.
Yeah, the Quadruple Alliance came in and squashed that Spanish revolt, and the British say, I don't think we have as much in common with you. You know, it's kind of like when you separate yourself from a clique of friends. Like, they start to have, like, different interests and hanging out with different guys. And you're like, out. You know, so England's like, I don't have as much in common with you as I thought. They step out of there. They are going to be able to reform prisons in the criminal code. They're going to allow membership in labor unions. Was this a thing happening on the continent, labor unions? No. Okay, big deal. It's a big deal that the British are going to say, yeah, you should form. You should protect each other. So this is a big compromise here. They allow their workers to unionize, to organize. And they are going to establish efficient metropolitan police force, and these are called bobbies. You see a picture here. So they organize a metropolitan police force called Bobbies, and that is a reform that is made. As pertaining to religious reform, the Test Act will be repealed. Remember in 1673, they had said that if you were a non-Anglican, like if you were a Catholic or a Calvinist, you couldn't hold office. Remember we talked about that way back after the Wars of Religion and the Glorious Revolution in England? With the Test Act, they had said you cannot hold office if you're not Anglican. Like, we're going to prohibit what you can do based on your religion. Yes?
This is just something I found out the other night, but apparently my mom is so much of a mutt when it comes to Europe that she might have Huguenot ancestors from like France during this time.
Oh, wow. That'd be cool to know their names. They might have been somebody we talked about. And so in the 1800s, we're here in the 1800s, they are going to repeal this. So, right, 1800s there, you need to know at this time period they're going to repeal them. They're going to say, that's not fair that we're holding you down, man, because you don't believe in the same faith as us. They're going to say that you should be able to hold office no matter of your religion. They are also going to give us the Catholic Emancipation Act of 1829, and it's going to grant full civil rights to Roman Catholics. So they're going to undo two things. Remember, Roman Catholics have been really persecuted under the Anglicans. And so they're going to say, no, you should have equal civil rights. It doesn't matter what religion you have. Now, this is all, really kind of slow. They're not saying that you can just jump up and take over power. We're not going to put a whole bunch of you in parliament, but we're going to open up some smaller office. We're not going to trample you in the streets, okay? Slow reforms. I like to call, and this is kind of ironic, I like to call England's reforms like a teapot. Why is that ironic? Because one of the greatest reformers is Earl Grey. And this is how I remember, or when I was in high school, how I remember how England dealt with its problems. It's like a teapot. What happens when a teapot builds up steam? It whistles, and then what should you do when it whistles? You should release a little steam at a time, right? You want your water to stay hot. You want to take it off a little, turn the heat down. What would the people on the continent do? Yeah, rip it up, throw a barricade up, cut its head off, okay? Smush the teapot. In England, they're like, let's just let a little steam out. We don't have to do everything at once. Those people are pissed off over there. Let's just throw them, a couple little happy thoughts and get them through, and we'll worry about the big problems as they come along. And so I always remember that Earl Grey is the reformer here that we're going to talk about, because England's like a teapot. So if you think about your QD number 3, why were there no revolutions in Britain? Edmund Burke. Slow reforms. No big, what the continent does is they're like, I'm ticked off, let's go kill somebody. They're like quick to do it. England's like, let's wait, we can figure this out without any heads in a basket. We got this. So evolution rather than revolution. What's important is that part of England's national identity, and remember how important nationalism is, part of their national identity is freedom. They've had the Magna Carta, other than its short repeal of time. Personal freedoms have been something that's very common. It's part of their national identity. Like, wouldn't you say as Americans that we see as part of our national identity our freedoms? Okay, and so differently than continental Europe, England sees that as part of their identity. And so that's important to why they want to maintain these freedoms. Even though they're conservative, they are also going to pertain their identity. Okay, they've had the Magna Carta since, 1215. So Earl Grey is our Whigs leader, and the Whigs are they conservative or liberal? They're liberal. So he is our liberal leader, and he was asked by the new King, George IV, to form a new government in 1830. The Whigs are heavily supported by the middle class. Who causes all the problems when it comes to revolutions? The middle class, okay? Middle class workers, middle class bourgeoisie, middle class, okay? So they're going to be liberals. Liberals want a lot of changes. This is going to give us the reform, that's not the slide I want to go to, sorry. The Reform Bill of 1832, and it is considered a milestone in British history. So you have the Tories and the Whigs who are working okay together. The Tories are all young and hip, and they're like, we can make some changes. Let's not let the teapot boil over. And you have Earl Grey, who's the leader of the Whigs, and they want liberal reforms. And so one of the most liberal reforms, I feel, and one of the most milestone moments in English history is the Reform Bill of 1832. And the Reform Bill of 1832 is going to be passed by by the bourgeoisie because a lot more of them can vote, and the bourgeoisie is the middle class. Remember, not everybody can vote at this time, but what this is going to do is it is going to, by a recent cholera outbreak, they don't have enough people to vote to have a representative government, and that's what England has. And so they need more people to vote, and they're going to start to expand this voting. It increased the number of voters from 6% of the population to 12%. Now, I do not want to say here that every man gets the right to vote. If you were a man, because we ladies, let's face it, it wasn't like the 1920s here, we're not getting the vote in England now. If you were a man, and you owned a house that was worth 10 pounds, the English currency, or more, you could vote. If you were a man and you owned a house that was worth at least 10 pounds or more, you could vote. So this opens it up from 6% to 12%. This makes 1 out of 7 males are able to vote. This is letting off the steam, guys. You're ticked off at us? Let's give you a little thing. Not everyone can vote, not all at once. But it's a significant increase, right? It eliminated underpopulated rural electoral districts, or the rotten boroughs, okay? So what it also did is get rid of what are known as these rotten boroughs. So during the Industrial Revolution, we had everybody move where? To the cities. So that left a lot of what used to be old cities where? Out in the countryside, out in the rural countryside, okay? And so we have what are kind of known as these rotten boroughs. So if you were a wealthy landowner and you own the land that these people lived on and there's not really anybody there, you still get a representative to represent that part. But they're not really representing anybody, right? And then you have like this one representative representing everybody in London. And they're representing like millions of people, right? And so what would you do to maybe some of the people that lived on your land who may not be able to vote now? Because there's no secret ballots. So you can see what everybody votes. If you're the wealthy landowner, what might you be doing while you're... Look that way, I'm going to take your house from you. Yeah. And so you're going to make sure they vote your way, okay? And so what was happening in these rotten boroughs is people are using their influence to sway the votes. And so they're going to get rid of these rotten boroughs and try to make representation more equal and make them about the manufacturing districts and cities that rose up from the Industrial Revolution. They are going to say, these landowners are abusing their power. And what's going to happen is this, and I've underlined it, you might want to highlight it. It resulted in the supremacy of the House of Commons over the House of Lords. Can you guys remember the last time we talked about commoners being charged in England? Yeah, we haven't really at all. So this is a watershed moment. This is a milestone. We have the common people now taking precedence in the Parliament over the House of Lords. So this is a big deal. Okay? Next we need to talk about labor reforms. I don't know if I put, labor reforms. We've talked about a couple of these, so some of this will be review. First of all, we had the Factory Act of 1833 under the Whigs, who say no child labor under the age of 9. We've talked about that. There's the Poor Law of 1834. We also talked about that in the Industrial Revolution. You don't have money. We're going to try to help you find a job. We're going to give you some money. You lived in workhouses. Do you guys remember what the workhouses were like, though? Yeah, really bad. Did they want you to stay there forever and ever? And no, they were like, get your butt out there and get a job. We're going to make it really hard on you here. But I mean... but it was still like some kind of support. Miss Putnam, you better get started on that district study.
You never gave me anything.
You said you remembered the directions.
No.
Is the same directions you just said?
You never gave me anything for this.
All right. So, and the Mines Act of 1842.
Are we just jumping?
It's on the computer.
I thought I was doing the typing part.
Yes, you type it on the computer. All right, all the directions are on that piece of paper. Okay. And then the Mines Act of 1842 prohibited child labor in mines. And then the 10-Hour Act limited work hours for women and children to 10 hours a day. I want to let you know, did somebody ask if we were jumping all around?
Yeah, because are we just like stating the...
I thought this was in the last one.
Because,
I think it's just what we talked about.
We're just listening. Yeah. The order we talked about in the Industrial Revolution.
and this is all in response to
working class.
This is what they want.
Yeah, this is what the working class wanted. It's what we talked about in the Industrial Revolution, the proletariat, the working class. You guys are getting rich. My kids are getting their hands cut off. Like, we need some reforms. This is the liberal Whigs. So under the Whigs, you might want to write here, under the Whigs, these are the people that forced all of this through during the Industrial Revolution. I want to tell you, for the 10-Hour Act of 1847, women and children were limited to 10 hours a day, but that meant an average of 10 hours a day. You might want to write average there. Because they could maybe make you work 18 hours one day and like 9, and as long as it averaged out to 10 hours a day. Yeah, yeah,
Wait, that's how they do it here.
yeah. So it was kind of, not exactly as good as it sounded. So, and then I want to go back up to letter B. I skipped B because we're going to talk about it more. We had already talked about the other 4. Slavery was abolished in the British West Indies by 1833. Okay? This is going to be important because along with these labor reforms and these liberal policies comes humanitarianism. And we are all people, and we should all be treated equally. And slavery is definitely by no means an equal, you can't even say that's an equal relationship. And so in the West Indies, it's going to be abolished. That means the slave trade is abolished. Do you think that we didn't have any slavery existing at all?
Of course not.
Okay. But the slave trade is going to be stopped. And one of the individuals who inspired this work is William Wilberforce. Okay, there's some kind of movie out there about him. I cannot remember the title of it. You could Netflix and type in the search William Wilberforce. I'm sure it would pull up.
Is it Amazing Grace?
Is it Amazing Grace? I watched so many movies.
It was about slavery.
Yeah, but it's a really prolific movie about how the anti-slavery may not have. It was his life's work. The whole movie has this premise he could have been the Prime Minister of Britain, but he stops his government pursuits to just pursue the stopping of slavery. So he devotes his life to it. He was an evangelical Christian who saw slavery as a sin in the eyes of God.
So slavery in the West Indies, so Caribbean.
The Caribbean, where sugar plantations were, where the British held most of the slavery. Yeah, that was my next point. Good point, Tyler. Think about how far ahead they are. We don't abolish slavery till the Civil War ends in 1865. So we're a long time, pretty long behind. Yeah.
It's amazing.
So, what else was I going to say about him? So, oh yeah, we could have. It just didn't happen.
It was Amazing Grace.
Was it? Okay, great. Thank you guys. It slipped me. I know I said it in another lecture because I just watched it then, and now I'm okay, I watched 10 movies between now and then. What was the title of this one? So Amazing Grace, but it's pretty much about how he could have gone on to do many other things. Not that ending slavery is not really important, but for the English, he could have, but he focused his whole life on this. So in 1807, he ended the slave trade for Britain. By 1833, slavery will be told to come to a stop in the West Indies, where most of the slaves were, which is really important because the sugar, remember, it takes a lot of people to process sugar. But in 1807, what really kind of sucks about this, though, is William Wilberforce, who gave up his whole life and any of the riches and power that he could have had, dies 1 month before slavery is abolished in the West Indies. Yeah, it's one of those moments, but he's accredited for getting this through. He devoted his whole life to it.
That actually makes a really good sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What? No, not at this time period. What? You're gonna have to wait till I'm done during their work time. Okay. So next is Chartists. Oh, but I don't have a slide for there. We'll talk about them. We talked about them before. The Chartists are liberals who are seeking universal suffrage, meaning everyone should be able to vote. Why is it important for liberals that everyone be able to vote? Yeah, they get to push things through that they wouldn't be able to because they're not holding the majority, usually in government positions. The Chartists are named because of the People's Charter. That's the charter that they put together. If you remember, the Chartists were the people who were attacked in the Peterloo Massacre. Remember when you had that sign up there and it says, suffrage for all? They're the ones that were attacked in the Peterloo Massacre by the state police. What? Were the Chartists violent? No. They were just organizing. And then remember those laws had been passed and you couldn't organize or assemble? And they were getting all those petitions signed. And
It's the Luddites that are violent.
the Luddites are violent. Very violent. Yes. The People's Charter is also going to demand a secret ballot, so rich people can't stand over your shoulder and tell you I'm going to fire you or take your house if you don't vote this way and get this guy in. They're going to demand a secret ballot. They're going to say there should be no property qualifications, like you shouldn't have to own a house worth 10 pounds. You're just alive. You should be able to vote. Okay? So they're going to want to take away that. They want to pay members of the parliament. Now this one usually trips students up. Why would they want to pay members of the parliament?
Because they're doing a job. That way they wouldn't have to have like another job where they were like super rich and controlling a bunch of other people.
Very good. Okay? Yeah, this way common people can afford to be in the parliament. Most parliament members were very wealthy and didn't have a family to support. I mean, they had come into their money, so you couldn't tie up all your time in the parliament and then not be out on your field or whatever doing your merchant activities. So they wanted to have a salary that you should be rewarded for doing.
I thought like more like controlling them since you have a salary.
No, it's more because the Chartists are liberals. They're going to say you should get paid so you can make an income from it. So you could afford as a lower income person to be part of the parliament. Okay? They also wanted to end the rotten boroughs and they wanted annual elections. Okay, they wanted annual elections for parliament. Significance. Although I cannot put the Chartists in the win category. We cannot put them in the win category. Why? Conservatives were highly organized. Liberals were usually like by the seat of their pants. Like, I'm ticked about this. Although the liberals in England aren't going to go cutting people's heads off, what happens is that the Chartists are going to get petition after petition after petition after petition signed. And they're not going to use violence or force. But the conservatives are unified. But the significance of this is although this movement failed initially, its ideas will be adopted in the late 19th and earliest 20th centuries. Okay? So right now they fail, but they're not going to give up. And they will see universal suffrage by the 19th and 20th centuries. Okay? From this. So that's the significance. Next, we need to talk about those good old corn laws. We've talked about them multiple times. We've been kind of following them through this history part second semester. So the corn laws are finally going to be repealed or taken away in 1846. If you remember, the corn laws have been high tariffs, right? They have placed high tariffs and have prevented the lower classes from making any money. They only benefited the wealthy. And so these are going to be repealed in 1846 and have a hand in it, of course, such unique names in history is the Anti-Corn Law League, led by Richard Cobden and John Bright, and they argue for lower food prices. And this is a picture I took of the plaque when I was in England. On the site in these years, 1844 to 1846, were situated the London offices of the Anti-Corn Law League. It's in the middle of the pavement there.
It was the same before it's like that, like Napoleon did.
Did they what?
Like turn set a fixed price, so we won't.
No, they're after Napoleon.
No,
1840.
for like the before, like.
But they had similar to Napoleon.
Like, are they trying to set a pick?
It's like,
Yeah, fair. They want fair prices, low prices on food. Yes. And so this is where the offices were, and it's in the middle of a street here showing where those offices were in England. So they argue for lower food prices, and this is partially a fearful reaction to the Irish potato famine that we talked about. They're like, oh, if food isn't affordable and something happened, okay, this could be really devastating. We're also going to see those navigation laws. If you remember the navigation laws we talked about, the English had first created them to go against the Dutch. Like, everything has to be on a British ship with a British crew, that sort of thing. Nobody else can make any money off of our goods. These are going to be repealed in 1849, and this officially ends mercantilism in England. So we have had mercantilism going on since Oliver Cromwell. Remember Mr. Crazy Oliver Cromwell? Back from, like the model army and such. We've been having this in effect since then. It's ended now, so another reform. Internal unrest in England was relatively small compared to other countries in Europe during the rest of the 19th century. Why? And this is the answer to number 3, and you'll write about it in your quick daily right here. Why? Because people saw that reform was available. Like, they might not have gotten everything they want right now, but their government's saying, we'll give you little changes. They may be like, it may not be me right here today, but it could be me tomorrow. Okay, so they're willing to go along with this without any revolution. This time is usually called the Victorian era because its time came under the reign of Queen Victoria. She ruled from 1837 to 1901. And it was a relatively peaceful reign. This is where all these little, like I call it the teapot, letting off the steam once in a while, making sure that things don't boil over. And so this is what, and we're going to talk about her more later, but just to give you a concept of the time period that we're in, the Victorian era. Yep. So, we got to talk about England. We got to take a break from revolutions. But we have to go back to the continent. So what do you think there's going to be a whole bunch of going on in the continent? War, bloodshed, revolutions. Who do you think's going to start it all?
French.
The French. The French sneeze, and the rest of Europe always catches a cold. Dang French. Did you have a question? So, revolutions of 1848. So we saw the revolutions of 1789 started by who? The French. The revolutions of 1830 started by French. And so the revolutions of 1848 started by, yeah, there we go, just to keep it repetitious. These are watershed political events of the 19th century. Highlight that. Okay? Things will not be the same in Europe after this. I use the term watershed a lot. It's because it's a time where we will never go back. Like it was forever changed at these moments. Yes?
You mean exactly that, or are you talking about watershed, like how Marvel and DC does every 10 years? They'll go, oh, I don't like that plot, and they'll reset Batman or Superman back.
It's like the same thing. Yeah, I mean, not a reset. It's forever different. Like you go back and you're changing it. So we'll see like a distinct mark here. These revolutions in 1848 are influenced by nationalism, liberalism, and romanticism, as well as economics. We're going to see that as well. Only Britain and Russia avoided significant upheaval. Why did Britain avoid significant upheaval?
They were able to keep their citizens calm.
They were able to let off a little steam and keep their citizens calm. Why do you think that Russia was left out of this equation? I didn't hear.
They're mean.
No, not because they're mean.
Secret police.
Pretty much
Those
the
police
exact
state.
opposite. Like they just pushed everything down so much.
Okay, kind of oppressed, but I mean that. But they were really, really, really behind everybody else. They had other fish on their plate. Like they weren't industrialized. You know what I mean? Like they had different priorities right
They
now.
have the problems that everybody
Yeah, they didn't have these problems. They don't even really have a middle class. We didn't talk about a middle class in
Still
Eastern
have
Europe.
servants.
They have serfs, and they have the nobles. They don't have a middle class. Who's the one that's causing all the trouble? The middle class. So without it, they're not dealing with the same issues, okay? So we won't see really any of this, and we won't see a revolt really in the Russia until it's the Soviet Union, which is some time to come. Okay, so if you remember, the rich in Russia were called the boyars. The poor were called the serfs. We don't have a middle class. So neither liberals nor conservatives during this time period could gain a permanent upper hand. So this is an overview of what's going to happen. Resulted in the end of serfdom, however, in Austria and Germany. You need to highlight all of number 5. Okay, this is important. This is the changes that come because of it. Resulted in the end of serfdom in Austria, Germany, universal male suffrage in France, parliaments established in German states, and stimulated unification in Prussia and Sardinia, Piedmont. Last of the liberal revolutions dating back to the French Revolution. So this is the last we're going to talk of. Okay, from this whole time span starting in 1789 to 1848. So what's going to happen are working class liberals are ticked off. Does anybody remember who the ruler of France is at this time?
King Louis the 18th?
No, not a king, a king, but a different kind of king. The bourgeoisie king, Louis Philippe. Okay, so he is our ruler, and the middle class starts to become ticked off. They are against Louis Philippe. They are mad. What do the French do when they are mad? Yeah, they riot, barricades, get the guillotine all sharpened up, right? So France sneezes, the rest of Europe's going to catch a cold. So here we go. February Revolution. Working class and liberals were unhappy with the king, especially his minister, prime minister, minister of foreign affairs, Francois Guizot, who opposed reforms. Okay, they're not putting in reforms. They are so ticked off and pushed back so much that the king will be forced to abdicate his throne. Okay, he will be forced to leave his throne in February of 1848.
Didn't he get his throne because somebody else had to abdicate because
Yes.
people pissed him too?
Yeah. So he'll be forced to abdicate his throne. What kind of government are the French asking for now? They are asking for a republic. They want no king. They want a representative government. And so this is going to be called the time of the Second French Republic. And this is run by the bourgeoisie. Again, who causes all the problems? The middle class, the bourgeoisie. Well, yeah, it could be the government's fault, but in stirrings, we usually see it's the middle class that are the ones that are upset. Why? They're not at the top, too close to the bottom for their own comfort. Okay?
Plus in Russia, they still have this problem, but a lot of the population is out in rural areas, and I was reading a thing where someone had videotaped a pack of wolves crossing one of the roads in Russia that stopped traffic.
So Russia, doesn't have a middle class at this time, so they're going to be, really, really rural, serfdom, all of those things at this time, not industrialized. Here was Louis Philippe. Sorry, I didn't change the slide there. So you remember our bourgeoisie king, dressed like bourgeoisie, with the breeches on, not like our other kings that we'd seen in England, all draped in the furs. And then here is the next individual we're going to talk about, which is Louis Blanc. Louis Blanc is a socialist thinker. We're going to get to more into socialism after we talk about romanticism, or you work in groups today. But he is a social thinker who led the working classes, and he demanded work for the unemployed. He thinks that it is ridiculous that people would not be employed, that they don't have jobs, and that the government is doing nothing about it. And so he wants to build a socialist republic to help the poor. He wanted to guarantee jobs. And he wanted to do this through what is called national workshops, which would be created to provide work for the unemployed. So now in France, we get life, liberty, fraternity, and a job. They're just going to add that one on there. So this becomes their new rallying cry, okay? And a job. Who do you think is going to have to pay for all of these people's new jobs and for the aid that they're going to get? The rich. And they're going to pay it through what? Taxes. But that's fine, right? Like the rich should totally have to pay for all the people who don't have stuff, right? Like the rich. They shouldn't have any, not if you're rich, okay? So we're going to start to see some problems grow here. So, reforms, however, that take place during this time period, because really we're going to have to call this revolution an epic fail, but some reforms do get made. We will see the abolishment of slavery in the French Empire at this time. That's important. So, do you guys remember when the slave trade was abolished in Britain?
1849?
1833. The trading stopped 1807. Okay. 10-hour workday in Paris. So just like we saw in England, 10 hours seems to be the number. 10 hours seems to be fair. Remember, it's an average of 10 hours. Could be doing, yeah, still.
So it'd be like 8 hours one day, 12 the other.
Yeah. As long as it averages out to 10 for all the days you worked. And that doesn't mean that you don't have to work 7 days, so. Abolish the death penalty. So, yay for some people who might be afraid of the guillotine at this time. Abolish the death penalty. And they're going to hold April elections between liberal capitalists and socialists. Our liberal capitalists are going to join up with our peasants in the countryside. And socialists and workers sought a revolutionary republic after Blanc was dropped from the assembly. Okay? What's going to happen is these people become very scared and they are going to want to shut down the national workshops. They are afraid of paying these extra taxes. Remember, like, this is what sparked the French Revolution with taxes. Okay? So Louis Blanc is going to be dropped from the assembly, and the closing of these national workshops, once he's gone, the assembly very easily gets rid of the workshops, and the people start to freak out again. And so once he's gone, we are going to get the June Days Revolution. And so what happens in June is the reaction of the people, the poor people, is going to be with the closing of the workshops that will mark the beginning of class warfare in France between the bourgeoisie and the working class. This is a big deal. You want to put a star here. This is the first modern instance. This is the first like class on class warfare. Like before they were fighting like the government, before they were fighting for separate needs against the government, this is like class on class, like poor versus rich, like middle class versus upper middle class. Okay? So first beginning of class warfare between the bourgeoisie and the working class. The workers, what do they want? They want those national workshops back. They want to be protected in case they lose their job. They wanted to be protected against poverty, and they wanted the income to be redistributed more fairly. They don't think it's fair that really rich people should say, I don't have to pay for you. They think the income should be redistributed. Okay? What do they do in France when they get ticked off? Right here, they take all of their stuff and they build barricades in the street. Okay? So they put up barricades in the streets. If you were ever wondering, this is another time, like the movie Les Miserables. This is what people say the setting was. I think it was the Revolution of 1830, like I really do from what I've seen in it, but a lot of people would argue that it came from the June Days Revolution, but it was not set during the French Revolution. We talked about that during the French Revolution. So it could be either the Revolution of 1830 or the Revolution of 1848.
Basically when they put the crap in the streets.
Yeah.
Did it end up like, how Les Miserables turned out? Failure?
Yeah, huge failure. Yeah, both the 1830 and 1848. Our only exceptions really are going to be Greece and Belgium when it comes to revolutions at this time. But we'll get into that. So what happens? They put up barricades. General Cavaignac is going to assume dictatorial powers, and he crushes the revolt. He kills 10,000 of these people in the June Days Revolution. 10,000 dead. Okay? This is a temporary, underline or highlight temporary victory for the conservatives. Okay? Temporary victory for the conservatives.
Like the Congress of Vienna was?
Yeah, but it was a little more than temporary, because it lasted for almost 100 years. So then we're going to have an election. So we had the June Days Revolution. It's June of 1848. We're coming up on an election, and Louis Napoleon, name dropping right here. We know Napoleon, right? Louis Napoleon, the nephew of Napoleon, is going to defeat General Cavaignac and became president of the Republic.
How did it pop up and say no?
He's not a Bonaparte. He's a nephew. So he's under his father's last name.
Nope.
No, he's not a Bonaparte. He's a nephew. Not a direct descendant. His name reawakens that revolutionary spirit, and he wins, most likely not because he's more qualified than Cavaignac. Cavaignac actually had a lot of power and had political success. It's because of his name. Just like, have you ever heard of like red shirt elections in the United States when we started our country? Almost every one of our presidents was elected because it's called the red shirt vote, like the bloody shirt, because they were a war veteran and a successful one. Not because they could be a good president, but because they had success in war.
So this was more of like a military, whoever came out on top, like after the smoke settled.
Yeah, very much so. Like our whole time period, all the way from George Washington on. George Washington started the First World War. Yeah.
I
He's
think
right.
all the way to Eisenhower.
What?
All the way to
Yes, I mean, the bloody shirt is like a documented, like people will vote for somebody that they, like, it's almost like that firefighter that like rescues the woman out of the burning building. You're like, God, I hope that's the guy that comes if my house is on fire. They're like, if he can protect me, he can take care of the country. It's just.
Some of them make really terrible leaders.
Yeah, I know. So I'm not saying it's a good policy. I'm definitely not saying like, hey, go vote for Bernie. I mean, Bush was in the military. It was like he was doing stuff for us there. So, let's see. What was I going to talk about? Oh, okay. Next slide. So Louis Napoleon, here he is here, all dressed bourgeoisie. He is going to start out, with some pretty liberal reforms, like all people can vote and all of these things. He's going to start out a lot this way, but the more he moves along, he is going to be able to consolidate power, and he is going to become the emperor, Napoleon III of the Second French Empire. Yeah, he's going to consolidate all of his power. What? Second Napoleon? We kind of skipped through it. Yeah. Napoleon III. Well, he's the nephew, and he wouldn't want to look like he's of direct lineage. So he's going to, kind of skip that second part. This other picture's hard to look at, but this is when he's emperor. You can see he's kind of donned those robes of like Napoleon. And these are the Siamese representatives are here bowing as he's being approached. So kind of starts out bourgeoisie, like liberal, like, I'm going to make some changes, but as Napoleons do, kind of consolidates everything. Yeah. So, we have all of that. What do we need to talk about? Oh, so that's what's going on in France right now. We're going to leave France for a minute because we need to talk about what happens when France sneezes. The rest of Europe catches a cold. So Italy, next in line. Italian nationalists and liberals will seek to end foreign domination of Italy. Okay? They remember nationalism. There shouldn't be any foreign peeps ruling over me. I'm Italian. I should have an Italian ruling over me. That's just how it should be. And so they are going to start to want to end foreign domination of Italy. And in 1849 or 1848, Milan, Lombardy, and Venetia expel Austrian rulers. I can pretty much, and you can write this right here to the side. These revolutions are going to go win, 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 and then capital letters lose. Win, win, win. We get all together. We get all feisty. We're all liberal. We go out. We win, win, win. Big capital letters lose. Okay? That's just how it's going to roll. And so we're going to start off with a win. And the Bourbon rulers in Sicily and Naples will be defeated. Okay? So they're kicking out foreign rulers. They're winning. Sardinia and Piedmont declare war on Austria, winning. And then we get Giuseppe Mazzini established the Roman Republic in 1849. And so he's really liberal. And he's like, oh, now we're going to be a republic. And so we kick the foreigners out. Now we're going to be like moving towards our own nation. And he goes even far enough to say, and let's kick the Pope out of Rome. Like, he's like, let's just get rid of, everybody. And the Pope's always been in Rome. He was protected by Giuseppe Garibaldi. So here is Giuseppe Mazzini. Should be easy to remember this duo, right? Same first name. That they go together there. And so Pope Pius IX was forced to flee Rome. Like, these guys are like, and they forced the Pope to flee Rome. However, like I said, it's win, 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 then what? Lose. So here we go. Here comes the failure. Failure in revolutions in Italy will result in conservative victory. Why? Conservatives are more organized. They have been in place longer. They know how to play the game. Liberals are usually like, rally cry, charge. And then they don't really quite think the whole process through. The conservatives are more organized. We also have French troops being able to take back the Papal States here. Causes, like I said, rural people did not support the revolutions. Okay? Rural people are like, I don't want any part of this business. And so you don't have the backing of a lot of people. That's second reason for failure. Fear of radicals among moderates. Why wouldn't you have a heightened sense of fear after you've watched what's gone on with these other revolutions in France? Like, they're afraid of what's going to happen if the radicals are supported too much. And a lack of leadership and administrative experience among the revolutionaries. They're just not as old as the conservatives, guys. You have to remember, when I say conservative, we're talking about like the Bourbons and all of the royal families that have been on the thrones of Europe for centuries. Okay? They have a lot more experience. They may not be the best rulers, but they have been doing it a lot longer. So reasons for the failure. So we need to watch the cold spread. So next is Austria. So Austria is really scared of nationalism. We've talked about this time and time again. Why from this map do you think that Austria is scared of nationalism? Yeah, they're surrounded and within their borders have a lot of different nationalities. How well is that going to work out for you if nationalism comes into your area?
You're gonna have a lot of separation and
Yeah,
fighting.
you're going to have a lot of separation, a lot of fighting, and a lot of loss of power for your ruler, right? So, they're afraid of nationalism, and this is the Habsburg Empire. It was vulnerable to revolutionary challenge of nationalists. I want you to write right here, the Habsburg Empire, we've been talking about them since September. They have been our most consistent empire, the Habsburg Empire. They have been with us this whole journey, this year. Do you think that they want to change? No, okay, they don't want to change. They fear nationalism. Yeah, they are not ready for this because within their borders lie a lot of different ethnic nationalities who have different nationalistic goals. Which means that each of these could say that we deserve to be our own nation. And so nationalism and liberalism really going to fear them. The Austrian government was reactionary. I've used this time and time again in my lectures. What's the word reactionary mean? It's different than revolutionary. It's the exact opposite. So you react to the revolutions. You are going to firmly stomp out anything that goes against what you want. Okay, they are reactionary. Liberal institutions were non-existent. Do you remember all of those things they put on there, like the burning of books and the firing of teachers and anything liberal had to stay out? Okay, so virtually non-existent. Social reliance on serfdom doomed the masses of people to a life without hope. Okay, and the February Revolution in France sparked rebellion for liberal reform. So, while we are going to have the Habsburg Empire right here, we need to realize that they are mainly conservative and so not going to be impacted as much right here, although they see a little spark of hope with the February Revolution. So next we need to talk about Hungary, which we shouldn't be right after lunch, right? So we have Louis Kossuth, I think is how you pronounce his name. I've heard it a couple different ways. Kossuth. And he is the Hungarian or Magyar leader, and he is going to demand independence. He wants things to be determined by your ethnicity. Okay, so in Hungary, he is going to want to see this. He is liberal and nationalistic. The Austrian Empire had collapsed. Okay, students and workers had staged mass demonstrations. Metternich, remember Mr. Nosy, the Austrian ruler who was all conservative, had been forced to flee the country at this time, had been forced out. And we are also going to see the Hungarian armies drove within sight of Vienna. However, what's our theme here of these revolutions? Win, 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 lose. Okay, so there was our win, win, win. They got some stuff done. Because then the conservatives are more organized. They're going to push back, so then we're going to lose. The Hungarians will ultimately be defeated, and the Austrian army regrouped and gained aid of the Slavic minorities, which resisted the Magyar invasions. They say what the Austrian army is going to say to the Slavs is, we've been ruling over you for a really long time. I mean, I know we haven't always treated you the best. We haven't been the best of friends, but you don't know how they're going to treat you. And so they get the Slavic peoples to come back and to rally with them, and they're going to push back, and they're going to resist the Magyar invasion. The Austrian and Russian armies defeated the Hungarian army, and Hungary will have to wait until 1866 for autonomy, okay, or to break free. So we won't see that happen until there. So ultimately, win, 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 lose. Epic failure. The revolution failed, and the revolutionary government failed to govern effectively, as was the case in Italy. Habsburgs were restored to royal absolutism. So this is just all comes down to smart conservatives. They evaluate the situation. The liberals are not organized. The conservatives come back, and the liberals win, 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 and then they lose. Okay? We'll hit it today. We're getting towards it today. All right. So we have Bohemia. This is an area of Austria as well. And we are going to have the Prague Conference of 1848 develop the notion of Austro-Slavism, which is really just a fancy way of saying a constitution and Slavic autonomy within the Habsburg Empire. It's a nationalistic thing, like we are Slavs, hear us roar, okay? Autoslavism, they want to be recognized. The Pan-Slav Congress, however, failed to unite Slavic peoples in the empire, and the Austrian military ultimately occupied Bohemia and crushed the rebellion, the Italian Revolution against Austrian rule. Okay, so win, 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 then what? Lose. Yeah, we don't have to know a whole bunch of details about all of these. You just need to know that who ends ultimately in the end? Conservatives. Okay, so far as we've seen. So, France sneezes, Europe catches a cold, all but England and Russia. That's going to include the German states. So revolutions inspired by the 1848 revolutions in France are going to begin in the German states. Liberals will demand constitutional government and a union or federation of German states. This is where Germany is going to start to creep in our picture, guys. In Germany, what's our next big war? World War I, okay? They are going to start to unify a little bit more. The Frankfurt Parliament on May of 1848 is going to be liberal, nationalistic, romantic leaders calling for elections to a constituent assembly from all states in the German Bund for the purpose of unifying the German states. 1848. Okay? They want a united Germany. Workers are taking to the street, okay, in rebellion. They want a constitution. They want Germany to be united. But there's a problem, okay? What's our problem? It's this little area here, okay? There is some lands that are held by Denmark, the Schleswig and Holstein, and they are German-speaking peoples, but they are held by Denmark, okay? So this area here. If Germany was going to unite, these German-speaking peoples should be able to be pulled into that, but Denmark holds them. So what's going to happen here because of nationalism is we are going to see that war is going to be declared. So they sought war with Denmark to annex Schleswig-Holstein, and in response to this, Prussia declares war on Denmark. Okay, why? Remember our secret alliances, remember our nationalism. They're going to rally around, and they're going to also declare war on Denmark. The Frankfurt Parliament, did you have a question, Sam, or were you just turning?
No.
Okay. The Frankfurt Parliament, which was this last slide I showed you, they've already been in session. They already want a constitution. They already want to be a unified nation. All of this is going on, and so what they are going to do is they are going to go to the ruler at the time, whose name is King Frederick William IV. And they are going to bring to him, they are going to say, we want a constitution. And he is a Prussian as well. So he is holding the rule over Prussia and these German states right now. And he is going to refuse, okay? He is going to claim that God gives me the right to rule you people. You people of the gutter, you lowly people, don't get to say what I am king of. And he is quoted as saying, he would not accept the crown from the gutter that has the stink of revolution on it. So he denies their constitution or the unification, even with the promise of being king over both. He will then disband the Frankfurt Parliament and say we're just Prussia, and impose a conservative constitution that guaranteed royal control of the government that will last until 1918. So ultimately, win, win, win. What? Lose. Ultimately, failure of Prussia and Austria to support unification movement resulted in the collapse. So Germany doesn't quite get there yet, but the idea is still in their head. We are going to be tracking Germany. Frederick William's attempt to subsequently unify Germany ended in failure. Austria demanded Prussian allegiance to the Bund, which is the German Confederation, and in effect this would have compromised Prussian sovereignty. And this is where we get the humiliation of Olmütz. This is a city in modern-day Czech Republic. And what happens is Prussia dropped the plan to unify Germany, leaving Austria as the dominant German state in the Bund. Austria being able to be dominant here is going to lead, it's called humiliation. It wasn't really humiliating. They kind of like backed out. But Prussia's going to seek revenge. And we're going to see that in the Austro-Prussian War, where Prussia is going to beat them down. So talk about revenge. I guess it's best revenge when you win, right? For not being the dominant.
I thought, didn't you say they backed out though? They're like,
Yeah, pretty much forced to back out.
Oh.
Yeah. Because of failure, the conservatives winning over. So, we're almost done, guys. I know it's taking a little while. We're there. All right. So, there's the German Confederation. Sorry, I forgot to switch it. You can see the outline of where all these problems are going on. Because we have the German Confederation, the Austrian Empire, and Prussia. All right there. Going to continue to cause us some issue. So, evaluation of the revolutions of 1848. You guys said you like it when I do review sections in here. So, here's your review. Neither liberal or nationalistic revolutionaries nor those of conservatism were able to maintain their dominance. So we saw ups and downs, win, 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 lose. So neither were able to keep their dominance. We had revolutions happen. We had some victories for the liberals. Liberalism, nationalism, socialism, and democracy made some gains, but were largely kept in check by the conservatives. Win, 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 lose. They won a lot of battles. They lost a lot of wars. Okay. Many of the revolutions were spontaneous movements that could not effectively maintain popular support. They were largely urban movements. Remember, the rural people did not get involved in these. The middle classes who led the revolution came to fear the radicalism of the working class allies. So we start to see fights even within the same group. And division among nationalistic ethnic groups in the Austrian Empire helped destroy the revolutionary movements against the empire. I would write to the side there, like in big letters, Austria stood in the way. Almost all of these that we talked about, who came in and crushed the revolutions? Austria, okay? Although Metternich will find his way out. Hit the door hitting in behind on the way out in this time period. So, what are our positive aspects? We cannot ignore the accomplishments. So next page, universal male suffrage in France, way ahead of us. Does anybody know when we got male suffrage in the United States?
Regardless of color?
All males, yeah, all males. After the Civil War, so around 1866. So way earlier than us, so that's a really big deal. Serfdom remained abolished in Austria and the German states, so that's a big deal. Going to give those people some hope for the future. Parliaments will be established in Prussia and the German states. Prussia and Sardinia, Piedmont will emerge with new energy to achieve unification. And the revolutions, this is the big one, number 3, you might want to highlight the whole thing. The revolutions of 1848 to 1849 brought to a close the era of liberal revolutions that had begun in France in 1789. Reformers and revolutionaries learned that planning and organization were ideal for success. I don't know why they thought that it wasn't, but they learned from this that why the conservatives won is because they're well organized, they're well planned. Rational argument and revolution would not always assure success. And after this will give us a time of calmness until the Germans get mad at each other later and start fighting each other. So we're going to get into a period of calmness right here, which is really ironic because the next thing that we would talk about, but you're going to work in as groups, is Romanticism. And so this next ism, the age of Romanticism, is going to give way to an age of realism. Okay?